Welcome to this forum, a transportation forum, organized by 350 Vermont. I'm joined by David Strumber. My name is Theo Talcott, and we have some other guests. Maybe.
Rachel Carnes, I'm from Burlington.
Nice to meet you.
Becky Jones, I'm from Brattleboro.
Carly Schwer from Burlington.
How valuable it is to be around people who know about the climate issue and think it's very important, because there's a certain shared language to it, which is, like carbon and cycles, and if you're just around people who don't have that knowledge, it's hard to talk about these things. And there's also a certain fevered worked upness about it that is important to be around, because a lot of the society doesn't think it's important. And so, but if you're having that sort of Hindenburg vision of like the end of the world because of runaway climate change, which you should have if you have seen. I mean, don't you?
Starts to weigh on you if you don't have anyone to talk to about it. It's a little bit confusing, a little schizophrenic. Like, wait, okay, there's the real world, which is climate change, and then there's this other world that everyone's living in. Yeah,
right, and
so confusing.
And it's helpful to like not be in the private madness of your own like. It's just me, and I think the world's going to... But you get around other people. Oh, she's saying she runs a cafe, and she also thinks that we're in a dire crisis. So very helpful to be around other people.
But there's more to the story.
Well,
but yes.
I thought... Yeah, Carly had a thought.
Well, I just want to say that that's kind of how Rachel and I initially read... started reading Bill McKibben's books, and we got really into it, and we started researching a lot, and we were like... looking for someone to kind of talk to about it, because we were just overwhelmed by all that we were reading, and we just wanted to reach out to people who maybe could help us do something about it, and that's kind of how we stumbled upon 350.org and ultimately 350 Vermont. And it's just been so great to be able to talk to people and have people, like-minded people, to share information with and to try to do positive things to help climate change.
Yeah. 350 Vermont is actually, for those of you that don't know, is a statewide chapter of 350.org, founded by Bill McKibben and a bunch of Middlebury students that became a worldwide organization that focuses on movement building for climate change, trying to really address the climate crisis. And 350 Vermont kind of started forming about a year and a half ago with the idea that Vermont has an opportunity to really do things that maybe no other state can do because of our demographics, our rural quality, our government, some of the qualities that have made Vermont distinct for a lot of years. And so the idea began to form that we could do Vermont as an ongoing chapter of 350.org that would really be about moving Vermont to the forward, to the front, and maybe making it kind of a hope state for the climate movement. And in terms of really addressing this climate crisis in a way that represents our heart and our passion and our care for the land and the care for the people.
Right.
Yeah, it's really necessary to have a sense of hope and a sense that we do still have a chance to do something, because I remember when we first started trying to figure out what's really going on here and educate ourselves about it, the last thing we watched was something from Bill McKibben. It was this 90-second video with no words, and it showed people bicycling and sailing around the world, and I remember that really inspired me.
Yeah.
It's definitely important to maintain hope, because even though this is a sort of dark vision of the future, there's no solution just like giving in to the darkness. We have to resist. We have to make another world in the place of the ExxonMobil world, and that's going to require rethinking our transportation system and so many things that are going to have to be different.
Yes, we have this dire future that we're all grappling with, trying to improve and trying to change and trying to prevent in any way that we can. And part of finding hope, we feel, I think the way we interpret it in our movement is really about translating our sense of kind of urgency to action in the here and now. What can we do today? What can we actually do that's meaningful and valuable, and begin to kind of focus that. But there's another element that we kind of began to kind of tease out of our conversations is that the way that we solve the climate crisis creates the vision for the future, and that we need a positive vision for the future, and we need to, and we need to hold it and create it and get it really tangible and clear, and let that vision guide us in creating solutions for getting off fossil fuels, and doing the things that we need to protect ourselves from to prevent runaway climate change. But in doing that, we're also creating this phenomenal, better future. A future that we actually want to live in.
That's true.
So it's a joining of the two.
Naomi Klein has been talking about that recently, saying it's so exciting that the answer to the economic problems is also to solve the climate change problem, which is like invest in rail systems and public transportation and building this whole other world we need. There's plenty of work to be done.
Not like the world we live in is so great. I mean, that we want to make, let's hold on to the world just the way the world is today, so we can stop climate change from ruining it. No, actually, the world we live in today is, maybe the climate is better than what we would, than it might be in the future, but the rest of the world is pretty,
needs
is
work.
Definitely pretty sucky. Needs some work.
Yeah.
And so it's like, fix the world we live in, make the systems work, give more a focus on economic and social and environmental justice issues, and change the system, and in so doing, create the future that we actually want to live in. So
one of our members, I think, was very successful in giving people a tool to do that, which is picturing that we are in that future. What is that future like? And then pretending to look back on the foolishness where we are now, and the confusion, and sort of like jumping over the hard part of getting to that future, but picturing what is it that we want? What kind of future do we want? And our Fossil Fuel Freedom Campaign and our transportation forums are about contemplating that. What will that look like?
Right.
For
example, I would love to see those, how in Paris or like New York you can rent a bike and like drop it off. I think, wouldn't that be great if every Vermont city had something like that, where you could just like bike loaner programs?
Well, it's funny because I talk about this better transportation system with a lot of people, and invariably I'll ask somebody, would you like to be able to walk to work? And they'll look at me kind of afraid, like, well,
5 miles?
No, exactly. They'll picture, but I live so far away, or but there's a highway in the way, or in other words, they're imagining it right now, step out of their door and walk to work, as opposed to, wouldn't it be amazing if we could create a world where you could do that? And once I open that door, they light up, and they're very excited about that idea. So it's funny, the barriers that people don't even know they have about what a better world would look like, and that we could actually do that.
And what are the suggestions that you would give for allowing that? Like having maybe living closer, or
well,
biking?
There are so many different ways that you can do it, but one of the things is to recognize that walking and biking need to start being considered valuable, rights even. So the ability to walk or bike safely out of one's door needs to be preserved. And our notions around public transportation right now are so rigid and probably defined by self-interest. They're so rigid, like, well, buses need to be inconvenient and not on time and not go where I want them to go. And they need to be dirty. And so there are some very limited ideas of what public transportation is. And even more than that, it needs to pay for itself. It needs to be for profit, as opposed to it being the linking system that allows us to do things like walk that half mile to a mile to a convenient bus stop where the bus comes by every 10 minutes. And you call it on your iPhone so it knows you're there, for instance. I mean, there's technology now that would allow us to have incredibly innovative systems. So, the skies are our limit in a way. other than what our imagination doesn't let us picture. So,
What could it look like?
yes, exactly.
I think that's really part of the conversation that we're
Yep.
hoping to have. And
I had the most beautiful experience in the Netherlands walking around, and they have it already, largely what we could go towards, which is like they have a great train system, and they have a great bus system, and they have trams that go through all the places, and the bikes and there are very few cars on the streets. It's so beautiful. It's like kind of like all this open space, and you don't feel like you're going to get run over every 2 seconds. And we really need to look to Northern Europe because they have not been sort of under the sway of the corporations as much. And I think they really got squished by the Nazis and were like, they came out swinging for the next 40 years, being like, we're going to make the liberalist place we possibly can, the most anti-Nazi thing we could possibly design. And they have done it in some regards.
grab the mic,
Go
Carly.
ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I just definitely agree. I think also it's not even about doing the right thing and helping the climate, but I think it's also when you go out and you bike to work every day, you get to see the landscape, you get to see nature, you get to be out in nature, you get to get endorphins from biking, and you just feel so much better. And I think that's definitely happening. I know in Denmark they're really big about that, like everyone bikes to work and stuff, and it's just so great. And I'm sure it definitely helps their morale and their feeling about themselves. They're getting exercise, they're being outside, and it's just so much better than driving in a car. And I don't know, it's just, I think it's great. So
Here's where it's such a hot topic. On the way up here, I was listening to the radio, and someone was talking about transportation and parking lots. And he estimated that a third of land is used for parking lots. Imagine the real estate potential there.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
And I've seen recently on the web they have these shots. They'll show a shot of a highway, and the highway is bumper to bumper with cars going all the way back to the back of the shot. Like 200 cars, and then they'll or maybe it's not 200 cars, maybe it's 100 cars, but then they'll show that group of people on bicycles, the same amount of people that are in all those cars actually on a bicycle. And it's a small group of people on a road. And so it's like how much we waste because we all have to be in a car, And I think I was at a meeting recently when they were talking about the fact that, part of the problem we have is that we're so mired in the, the one car per person mentality that we just don't think about what the future could look like. And, we were joking on the way down if they raise gas to $10, a gallon overnight, I don't think Vermont would shut down. I think we'd figure it out pretty darn quickly, and I think that's the kind of thinking that we need to do. What would that future look like? Go ahead.
It's interesting how the car is such a one-person vehicle, too. Just coming from China, I would see 6 people piled into, like, the little bike contraptions, like those little metal cabs, or
Rickshaws.
there would be a bicycle with pulling something like a trailer in the back with 6 people. But then every time I saw a car, it would be one person in that car.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a mentality of, I mean, it is freeing. It's a great feeling, and that's why people are addicted to it. But it's not helping us.
Well, it's funny because it is a great feeling to go fast and to be in your own car. But it's also such a great feeling to walk or to bike. But it's so dangerous now. It's so hard to do it
Exactly.
because our transportation system is so taken over by the car that we don't have that choice. So we're left with that other great feeling, which isn't so great, but it's better than maybe being crowded in a bus with lots of other people. But it's not as good as walking.
Very important point that how much of our public space is consumed by automobiles, and how unsafe it is. I mean, it's a real life or death experience to walk down almost any American city and not get run over. But it's very different
in
if
China,
there's right.
I had several. Every time I crossed the street, it was a life or death situation.
So you just got back from China. I would love for you to maybe.
Transportation in China compared to transportation in America.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Give us a snapshot.
Are they
Oh,
talking
wow.
about climate change in China?
Just to make sure everybody knows that you got back from China when?
At midnight
Last night. So
Very
there's still a
dead-
culture shock.
Very
your
dedicated
mind.
climate activist here, and we're jumping right back into.
What was the question? Are they talking about climate change. And we were actually talking about this earlier, how I saw a ton of billboards and signs everywhere making people aware of the pollution. And there was a note from the CEO of China Eastern talking about how they have the polluted city, how it used to be LA, and now they're hosting, I guess, one of the most polluted areas in Beijing, and how they want to do something about it. But I really saw that there was very little actually being done, except when they had held some sort of event, such as the Olympics, when they shut down factories and switched to electric bikes. And that, for a year of doing that, it gave them 2 weeks of blue sky. The rest of the time I was there, I did not see blue sky the entire time. And that was just shocking to me.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that they had public service announcements about it.
So they definitely are talking about it, which is a start.
More than us. And I also liked, we talked about in the car right up here, just
In
how
the car.
in the car. I know, I hate to say it. We did carpool though.
There was 3 of us.
But we were talking about Rachel's experience in China and their work situation. And I just think that's such a great idea to establish here in the U.S. I don't know if you want to kind of talk about it, but basically their homes and their workplaces are the same.
Not for everyone, but
a lot of people.
When there was a shop front.
Yeah, their shop fronts, they'll close down for the day, and then they'll just make it into their residence where they'll just eat dinner in their shop, and people can stop by and get what they need, but they're technically closed for the day. And I don't know, I just feel like why do we have these 2 separate places? One is our living area and one is our work area. Can they be intertwined somehow?
You go back to a village life. In a village life, you didn't have the village place where you went to work. You had your home, and then you probably did all your business out of your home or out of your farm or whatever. So it's like, do we need to do it this way?
Well, it's interesting because from the 50s until now, there's actually been an active push away from what you're describing until recently, when we're starting to talk about it again. And that is the idea of mixed-use space as opposed to the zoning that we had until, really, it's still there now, the zoning that says you can't live where you work. There is zoning that won't allow businesses to be next to homes.
Why is that?
Businesses. It probably had a lot to do with the fact that health issues around agriculture meant that living close to your pigs could give you cooties, especially as agriculture got more centralized and dirtier. And it's whether it was intended or not, this separation of business and home has led to a real expansion of those businesses. So you have these really concentrated monocultures that are not very healthy, but they've allowed to get that big because they're not close to people's homes where it could be an issue. So it is kind of interesting to start thinking, for sustainability, bringing it all together means that people are going to notice those things more, and it's going to be healthier.
The idea of taking anything that's dirty and putting it away from us is just it's insane to me, because the earth is only so big, and the size that it's gotten to, like going to China and seeing how polluted it is, and knowing this is where all of our goods come from. And the reason we do this is because we don't want this pollution at home with us. Well, it's still affecting everyone on the planet, especially those people who really deserve it the least, and who, not that anyone deserves it, but that they really have contributed no fossil fuels.
The floods last summer in Pakistan were so unfair. It's like one of the poorest places in the world and least able to handle it. And if that's where like the climate effects are most felt.
Well, I've often felt like, why is it that factory owners are allowed to build their factories anywhere other than their own backyard? I mean, why is it that it's okay for them to go to a poor neighborhood and dump their toxic waste?
Yeah.
I mean, I know why, but it does seem so unfair.
Unfair.
How did it get that way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should.
Well, I think this is, again, kind of what we were chatting about earlier, and this has been a big part of our conversation, is, the public good, the fact that I can profit by destroying the environment, but I don't actually pay for the damage that I do to the environment in any way, shape, or form. So I don't pay for the cleanup. I don't pay for, the impacts to other people. I don't pay for all those other things. I don't pay for the garbage that I create, but I can make a ton of money off it. And so, the wonderful thing about, I think, the Occupy movement that's been so really empowering for a lot of us is that it's brought a lot of subjects that have been kind of like we couldn't really talk about. You couldn't really say, capitalism doesn't really work that well for everybody. You couldn't actually say that, without having people say, well, you're commie, whatever,
Right.
So now you can say, capitalism really doesn't work that well for a lot of people. In fact, maybe only works right now for the 1%, or some
got a
small
number.
percentage
Definitely
of
not working for
people.
the future generations or the climate.
And for a lot of the population that you were probably visiting on your trip, it doesn't work so well. They really get used for the greater good of other people, and so it's like part of this is, again, I think this sounds like an economic conversation, but it's a lot, I think, of why the climate movement is so exciting right now, because there's a gathering, a nexus between social, economic, and environmental or climate issues that we're not going to be able to fix the climate problem. We're not going to be able to fix the climate problem unless we address the social, economic issues and political issues. It just won't happen.
So why don't you talk about the transportation forums, how that came from the Fossil Fuel Freedom Campaign?
Sure. Well, again, we talked about this need for kind of more of a visionary look at the future. So it's not just about fixing climate in some ethereal universe. It's about the world we live in has to change. We have to get off fossil fuels. We know that. Anybody who has their eyes open and can feel the weather out there knows that we have we have a changing climate, and it's changing much more rapidly than anybody predicted, and it's we really have no idea where we're headed. I mean, we have a lot of computer models to tell us, but so far every model that's been predicted, we're racing ahead of the predictions. And so the future is any predictable livable future is dependent on our ability to get off fossil fuels. And so creating a vision for a society that is fossil fuel free, but again, when conversation with people like the Workers' Center and the other groups that we've been working with, is that it has to be also a world that meets the needs of the people. And so we began this kind of a idea of one movement for people and the planet. Is really the way we think about our Fossil Fuel Freedom Campaign. One movement for people and the planet that really joins the needs of everyday people and also gets us off fossil fuels. So
it's so good, because any system we try and put out there actually needs to do that anyway. It needs to actually meet people's needs at the ground floor, and also that's justice too, and we want to make a just future. So
absolutely.
It's really exciting because, excuse the pun, but there's a real intersection here between...
First good joke of the day. All right, well done.
Between the different interests that come together around the transportation forums. There's the exercise enthusiasts who want to be able to walk and bike more. There are the climate change activists who want to be able to reduce their carbon emissions. And then there are the people who are now getting more and more desperate to be able to get to work because they can't afford gas or their car upkeep. And that's kind of everybody. That it's starting to be that everybody is talking about transportation. In Brattleboro, just about every issue of the Reformer, the local paper, has had something about transportation. And I'll say as an aside that tragically in the past 4 months, 4 different people have been hit by cars in Brattleboro and 3 died. So that's part of why it's become quite a conversation piece. And it's everywhere. The transportation issue is everywhere. And I've been thinking about this, that transportation ends up being at the heart of a lot of the really historic changes in our past, and I feel like we're really at that point again of this historic pivoting, and maybe this is going to be at the middle of it. So David, do you want to say some more about what the forums are going to look like?
No, actually, I want to. I'd love to hear you I'd like to hear the elevator version, which is a short talk, on health and transportation, because I think this is something that really a lot of people don't get the potential of what we're talking about.
It's a good point, even though it's sort of in everybody's consciousness right now. In addition to being a restaurant owner, I am a physician. And, that typical restaurant-physician combination.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah. So there is this incredible opportunity that we have right now in merging, in breaking down the walls of two silos. The two silos are healthcare and transportation. And right now there is, let us say, oodles of money in healthcare, and there is very little in transportation. And I'll throw out some numbers. We spend about $7 a person per year in Vermont on transportation, and it costs about $8,000 a year per person for healthcare, as an example.
So we spend $7 per person from the state, you mean, or is it
The state,
out of
the state spends about $7 a year, and the reason I say healthcare costs as opposed to the state spends is that right now, of course, it's a real mix. Some people have private insurance, some people have state insurance, and so on. But it costs about $8,000 per person, and that includes those who the state pays for. So there are those who the state has to pay about $8,000 a person for health care. And this is very salient because by 2017, the state will be paying for everyone because we're going to single payer. So which I see as a good thing, and I'll explain why. But so that's a very profound difference in dollars. And we're spending that much for healthcare without getting much. We all, I think, are very aware that obesity is a huge, literally an epidemic in the country. And we know how to treat obesity, which is diet and exercise, but we haven't figured out that way to bring those two things together. How do you prescribe exercise and food? And so the way I see doing that is to create a public transportation system designed around walking and biking as a way to allow people to walk and bike. One of the big...
That is a wonderful two birds with one stone thing, isn't it? America's a little bit overweight and it needs to bike more.
Not a little, I'm afraid. But what's fascinating...
We would benefit. The solutions are also the solutions to this thing.
And it's the same thing. The vision of the future is going to be reached by making it a better life to live in today.
It's what's fascinating is that the studies, the numbers, the knowledge is out there, but it's all very siloed. There's one study that looks at the health of those who use public transportation, but it doesn't look at carbon emissions. And then there's the study that the state did on the economic impacts of walking and biking, which just came out a couple weeks ago. But it doesn't really look at the health part of it. It's fascinating to see these missed opportunities, but that allows us this incredible opportunity here in Vermont to start talking about this amazing chance we have to improve everyone's daily lives, to I want to say save, so I'm going to say it, save the planet.
Yeah, save the planet.
And get back at the oil companies at the same time. It could be better than that. So
satisfying.
It's these studies show that people who use public transportation are significantly healthier, just because they're walking that half mile to and from the bus, as opposed to those 10 steps to their car.
Wow.
Not to mention the reduction in accidents, in the reduction in smog, which is causes severe illness. All of these incredible things that happen when public transportation is held up. And that brings me to one other thing, which is that we are a little limited in this country when we think about public transportation because we think it has to pay for itself. When in fact, if we think about our roads, of course, we all pay for them with taxes. But we couldn't do without them. And so they pay for themselves. And really, if you start linking a well-designed public transportation system with health and how much we pay in healthcare, the country spent $2.5 trillion for health care in '09, and the state spent $4.7 billion, and our GDP alone is $4.8 billion. So, and by the time we're a single payer, it's estimated it's going to cost $8 billion. So we're talking about orders of magnitude above what we're talking about with transportation when we talk about healthcare. So this opportunity is just enormous to save money.
Which I think, you know, the one thing that's kind of interesting too that we've been kind of, it brings us to this idea of the public good, you know, what is the public good, and, you know, the commons. And I think, you know, another aspect of that that's been really powerful. Have you guys ever heard of much of the Healthcare as a Human Right campaign? The Vermont Workers Center ran a campaign. I mean, there was a lot of people working on single payer for a lot of years. It wasn't like it came out of nowhere, but they started off doing exactly what we are doing now, which is going out into the community and really just having conversations with people about what does healthcare look like for you, and why is, you know, what do you need, and what would you want, and how would, you know, how would you get there, and gradually out of conversations, you know, this idea of the single payer healthcare program emerged. But what was unique about the way that they began to really campaign around it is that kind of based on a foundation that healthcare is a human right. So we have a right to, you know, healthy food. We have a right to, you know, to healthcare. We have a right to, you know, healthy living. You know, we have a right. Actually, one of the, if you look at the human rights, you know, some of the documentation on the human rights, there's actually a right to freedom of movement, which in some cases you could say that means freedom for transportation. You know, so, you know, it's like they then began to campaign on that healthcare is a human right. It's a basic fundamental human right, and that we shouldn't have to, you know, be gouged by the profiteers, you know, for healthcare. It should be something that we get is freely given, and that we have the opportunity to you know, take advantage of, and that became a kind of a grounding foundation for the campaign. That then, as they moved into the state house and started working with, you know, some of the legislative people, you know, it's kind of hard to wiggle around that. It's kind of hard to say, well, you know, gee, we haven't really got time for healthcare. You know, we really haven't got time for human rights right now. You know, it's not convenient to really fulfill your human rights today. You know, so we're not really going to get around to giving you, you know, fulfilling human rights.
This is the nice thing coming out of Tim DeChristopher and Peaceful Uprising. He said the phrase, "Demand a livable future."
Yeah.
It's like, we demand a livable future. That is not too much to ask, right? We're like heading for the cliff here in the Cadillac, and we have a right to be like, no, you crazy maniacs, stop. We're getting out. We're going to build bike lanes and solve the obesity problem while we get people to walk, and all that would be tons more fun than just like wrecking the planet in the next 10 minutes, like some deranged renters who were like, just like, we're leaving the ski chalet, let's rip the copper pipes out on the way out, you know? I really feel like so depressed by my species lately. Like, I heard a wonderful thing the other day, this woman saying we should cultivate the parts of humans that make us feel proud to be humans rather than appalled.
I think part of the problem is that it's really moved away from individuals. Like, there are individuals leaving the oil companies, leaving the mines and the tar sands, leaving their machines, but then they're quickly replaced because there's money there. And it's grown so large that it really can't be stopped by one or two people saying, I'm going to stop doing this.
Step out of it. It's true. We're up against a great amount of inertia now with this system, which is so self-interested, you know, and they're willing to, like, the thing with the tar sands is just so amazing. They're like, it takes like 1.5 gallons of energy to get 1 gallon of, and they have to run 4 gallons of like water through the process, and they have to kick native peoples off the land and so forth. But it's just deranged logic of this system that we have to fight. But
when one person realizes that and they get out of it, there's always one person waiting there who has no idea, waiting for that paycheck.
Right.
So
that model has been reiterated time and again. When a corporation has control, it calls the shots, and that's more and more what I'm thinking about when I think about this idea of creating this public transportation system for Vermont, yes, it's wonderful for reducing carbon emissions, and yes, it's great for health. But I also think it's finally a way that we actually could stand up to the oil companies, because I grew up in the 60s and I have seen what boycotts do. And the problem right now is we are being held hostage by a transportation system where we have no choice but to drive. I mean, we are all conscientious climate change activists, and we all had to drive here. We tried very hard not to, and we still had no choice. So I see this as an incredible opportunity for us to say, look, we don't have to drive everywhere. We have to work really hard to get this system, but part of the benefit of having something like this is we can finally say, we don't need oil anymore. And that's pretty powerful.
So we were talking on the way down here about, you know, the work you do and the future you have, and then where climate activism fits in. It's pretty cool. You think about, you know, I mean, people think climate activism is just, you know, like rallying in the streets. It's about pretty fundamental change process. I mean, that has to be exciting to kind of get involved in, I would think.
It is, but it's also stigmatized so much, I think. Like, you know, you tell your friends that you're doing all this stuff, and they're just like, oh, you're just an activist, you know. They kind of, you know,
Really?
they do. They categorize. I think it's definitely
Cool.
categorized.
Yeah.
And if you're just, you know, try to act like a normal person, and I don't know, there's different ways of going about talking to people about it, and I definitely love being involved in everything, but I think there is a sort of stigma to being an activist, because I think people look at you differently and think, you know, you're just a protester, or you're just, you know, a hippie or something.
I think there's also a disconnect between what's been going on in the past 50 years with people save the rainforest, save the planet, save Earth, and then to what's happening right now, which is we're really starting to see the effects of that. I mean, we're running out of oil faster than ever, and it's having drastic, it's really affecting everything. I mean, everything's connected to it. And so people don't really see the connection between being an environmentalist and the problems that are going on today, and how it's really urgent.
Like
to
a lot of people just say, you know, that I'm like a crunchy environmentalist. And I think it is just, it's like, I just want to be like, no, this is something that everyone should be thinking about. It's not that I'm an environmentalist. I live on the planet Earth, and I think about these things. So I think everyone should be an environmentalist then.
Well, I think actually this is one of the things. I mean, even the people who are environmentalists will tell you that environmentalists, have failed miserably in doing a lot of the work. There's been a tremendous amount of good that's been done, but there's also been a lot of marginalization and failure in terms of the environmental movement. And I think that a lot of us have to say, you know, we're not that. We're not the one that sat back and said, okay, you know, big oil, you keep, you know, funding our program, so we'll keep saying, you know, it's okay, keep trashing our planet. You know, we're you know, I think that this is really, again, the kind of, activist is probably another overused word and a misnomer, but I think we're people who stand for, you know, what's right and for the future, and are just going to say, like Theo said, no, you know,
no more.
Just say no. So I think it's you know, I think it's time to recast it.
Speaking of no more time, our time's almost up here, so maybe closing comments from everybody. And
yeah, I just want to say I'm so glad that I was able to get involved with 350 Vermont, and it's been really great getting to know all these new people, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
It's great to have you guys here, and it's great to be here. This is so important, and it's inspiring to see how many people recognize that, and more people are recognizing it. I think the time has finally come where we're going to really see change.
Well, I would say it's always so satisfying to talk to people about climate issues and to gather. And that's one of the reasons I think it's important to make media and to put these voices out there, because, you know, our larger society is not having this conversation, and so I think we have to bring it forward and say this is normal. This is sane and reverent to have conversations about climate, and it's not, you know, we're not no, no, whatever, but this is realistic. And so thank you for coming to speak today on these important ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much what you were going to say, as well as I'm just excited to start putting this new transportation in motion and really getting people excited about it and doing everything that we can.
Putting new transportation in motion. I like that.
All right.
Thanks, for giving us a chance just to talk about it.
And people can go to 350vermont.org to find out more.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you out there in TV land and internet world.
Studio
Bye.
audience.
Studio audience. Very helpful.
Oh, that's good.